Welcome. So today, we're going to tackle one of the most powerful tools in all of medicine, the electrocardiogram. Now, I want you to forget about just seeing wavy lines on a piece of paper. Think of the ECG as a super detailed electrical map of the heart. It's a map that can reveal rhythm, rate, and even life-threatening conditions, all in a matter of seconds. It's an incredible tool.
So the big question is, how can you learn to read this incredible story the heart is telling? Well, that is exactly what we're going to break down today. Seriously, by the end of this, you're going to feel so much more confident interpreting the key features of an ECG. And trust me, this is one of those fundamental skills. It's really your gateway to cardiac competency.
All right, so what is an ECG, really? At its core, it's a totally non-invasive test that just records the heart's electrical activity. Just keep thinking of it as that dynamic map we mentioned. It shows us exactly how electricity is flowing through the heart with every single beat. You can see why this map is our best window into the heart's overall health. Okay, so to build this awesome map, the ECG machine needs to look at the heart from a bunch of different angles. It does this using what we call the 12-lead system. So let's dive in and see how this actually creates such a complete picture. And right off the bat, let's clear up something that trips a lot of people up. A 12-lead ECG doesn't actually use 12 electrodes. It only uses 10. Kind of weird, right? But what happens is the machine takes the information from those 10 physical spots and then calculates 12 different electrical views or perspectives of the heart. So 10 stickers, 12 views. Okay, so the first 6 of those views, they come from the limb leads that go on the arms and legs. You've got your bipolar leads, that's I, 2, and 3, and they give us lateral and inferior views. Then you have the unipolar leads, AVR, AVL, and AVF. These just give us some extra angles, looking from the right, from the high lateral side, and looking straight up from the bottom. And speaking of those leads, this brings us to our very first super important exam trap. Listen up for this one. Normally, the heart's electricity flows away from the AVR lead, so naturally, its waves should be negative. They should point down. If you ever see a big, tall, upright QRS complex in AVR, your first thought shouldn't be some exotic disease. Nope. It should be a simple technical error. 99% of the time, it just means the arm leads are on backward. All right, next up we have the 6 precordial leads. These are the ones that go right on the chest. They're placed in a sequence right across the chest, and they give us this amazing horizontal slice view of the heart. So V1 and V2 look at the septum. V3 and V4 check out the anterior wall, and V5 and V6 cover the lateral wall. See that nice progression? That's going to be so key for localizing problems later. And that brings us to another huge clinical pitfall. Seriously, accurate placement is everything. It's super common for people to place the V1 and V2 electrodes a little too high on the chest. The problem? That simple mistake can create a pattern that perfectly mimics a really serious condition like a right bundle branch block or even a STEMI. So yeah, precision really matters here. So you might be thinking, okay, why do we care so much about all these different views? Well, here's the payoff. When a coronary artery gets blocked during a heart attack, we can use these specific leads to pinpoint exactly where the damage is happening. And this, my friends, is what we call coronary territory localization. It's like being a detective. And a fantastic way to remember all this is with the simple mnemonic, SALI, or S-A-L-I. Here's how it works. See changes in V1 and V2? That's S for septal wall, usually fed by the LAD artery. Changes in V3 and V4? That's A for anterior wall, also the LAD. For the lateral wall, you're looking at leads I, AVL, V5, and V6. That's the LCX territory. And finally, I is for the inferior wall, seen in leads 2, 3, and AVF. That's your RCA. SALI. Simple and effective. Okay, so now we know where to look. The next logical step is figuring out how to measure what we're seeing. And for that, we need to understand the grid paper itself. Every line on that ECG is plotted against 2 key dimensions, time and voltage. Now this grid is totally standardized, which is great. Horizontally, each tiny little box represents 0.04 seconds. Vertically, it's 0.1 millivolts. And since 5 of those little boxes make up one big box, you can just do the math. A large box is 0.20 seconds wide and 0.5 millivolts tall. These numbers are the absolute foundation for every single measurement we're about to make.
And using that grid, we can calculate the heart rate in a few different ways. If the rhythm is nice and regular, the quickest trick is the 300 method. Just divide 300 by the number of big boxes between 2 R waves. Easy. But if the rhythm is all over the place, that won't work. For irregular rhythms, it's better to count the number of QRS complexes in a 10-second strip and just multiply that by 6. And if you need to be super precise, count the small boxes between R waves and divide 1500 by that number.
All right, so we've covered the layout of our map and the scale we use to read it. Now it's time to learn the language itself. Think of each part of that ECG waveform, the P wave, the QRS, the T wave, as a letter in the alphabet of the heartbeat. First letter in our alphabet, the P wave. This little bump represents the atria contracting, atrial depolarization, and its shape can tell you a lot. If you see a broad, kind of notched P wave, we call that P mitrale, and it points to left atrial enlargement. On the other hand, if you see a tall, pointy P wave, that's P pulmonale, and it suggests right atrial enlargement.
Okay, next up is the main event, that big spike, the QRS complex. This is the ventricles contracting. Now, if it's too wide, more than 120 milliseconds, that's a big clue that there's a conduction delay, something like a bundle branch block. And what about the T wave that comes after? That's the ventricles recharging or repolarizing. Watch out for tall peaked T waves. That's a classic sign of high potassium or hyperkalemia. And if those T waves are flipped upside down, that could mean ischemia.
And here is a fantastic memory anchor for you, a real high-yield pearl. You know that tiny little U wave that sometimes shows up after the T wave? Well, if you see a really prominent U wave combined with a flat T wave, your first thought, your top suspicion, has got to be hypokalemia, low potassium. That is a classic pattern you do not want to miss.
You know, it's not just about the shape of the waves themselves. The timing, the space between them, is just as critical. These intervals can reveal all sorts of hidden conduction problems that you'd completely miss if you only looked at the waves. Take the PR interval, for example. It should be between 120 and 200 milliseconds. What if it's too long? That's a first-degree AV block. What if it's too short, and you see this funny little slur on the QRS called a delta wave? That screams Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. Then there's the QT interval. This one's super important because a long QT interval puts the patient at a huge risk for a deadly arrhythmia called torsades de pointes. So what kind of things can cause that dangerous long QT? Well, here's another super handy mnemonic for you, A, B, C, D, E. A is for antiarrhythmics, B is for biotics, think antibiotics, C is for certain CNS meds, D is for depressants like tricyclics, and E is for electrolyte problems. It's just a really simple way to run through a pretty complex list of causes. Last but not least, let's talk about the heart's overall electrical axis. You can get a really quick read on this just by looking at two leads, lead I and lead AVF. It's called the two-thumb method. If the QRS is pointing up or positive in both leads, your thumbs are pointing up, axis is normal. If it's positive in I but negative in AVF, they're leaving each other. That's left axis deviation. And if it's negative in I and positive in AVF, they're reaching for each other. That's right axis deviation. Super quick check. Okay, let's take a quick micro pause right here. I want you to think. Based on what we just talked about, if you see ST elevation in leads I, 3, and AVF, which wall of the heart is in trouble? Think about it. Got it? It's the inferior wall. Exactly. All right, here's our final checkpoint to really make sure this knowledge sticks. This is a common clinical question. Both a heart attack and pericarditis can cause ST elevation. So, what's a key finding on an ECG that would make you lean towards pericarditis and away from a heart attack?
And the answer is diffuse, concave ST elevation that you see across multiple lead territories, especially when it's combined with PR depression. That whole pattern is just classic for pericarditis. Fantastic work today. And hey, to really make all this stick, be sure to download the high-yield notes we've attached and check out the quick revision mind map. It'll really help strengthen that visual recall and make your revisions so much faster.